TL semicolon DR. I came on my sister during an anime con bukkake. I was 25 and she was 22 when this happened a year ago. She's actually my half-sister. I was conceived naturally by my parents, but by the time they were trying for her they found significant difficulty. Tests were done and it turned out my dad's sperm count was extremely low and that me being conceived in the first place was an incredible stroke of luck. My parents weighed their options and ended up settling on artificial insemination. The best sample available was from a Japanese man, the rest of us being quite white, with a lot of Irish and thus a whole lot of gingers on my dad's side, but they saw no problem with this, and so I got a harper little sister. My family is quite open with each other, so as soon as my sis, let's call her Katie, and me Max, was old enough to realize she looks different from all her ginger cousins, that in our little nuclear family were all brunettes. Aside from her darker head of black, they were honest with her and acknowledged her genetic heritage. I don't think Katie really had a strong reaction at first, but by the time she got into middle school and then especially high school, she really started to lean into it as she learned more about Japanese culture. She joined anime clubs, took online Japanese classes, she's now moderately fluent, became infatuated with kawaii things, and made full use of that aesthetic when decorating her room and possessions. And, feels odd for me to talk about it, started doing her makeup to emphasize the epicanthic fold around her eyes, making her look less mixed than she does naturally. The way she engaged with all of this seemed really playful, though I don't think she feels displaced or has identity issues over not knowing any family members that share her race. I think she just embraces it as something cool that makes her different. Especially in the rural community we grew up in. I've never had a real heart-to-heart with her about it, though she knows I'm open to such things, and that I truly love her as much as any sister I could have, because I wouldn't feel comfortable pressing a conversation on an issue in which I'll never fully be in the same shoes as her, but that's my impression. I guess I'll describe her now. She's really short, 5'1"-ish, and leans heavily towards the tight side of curvy. I guess you could call her a short stack. Built too wide to call petite, but from what I'd seen in bathing suits, very well toned with clear curves and no belly. She's just made thick. I won't pretend to know cup sizes, but her boobs are pretty small, though she makes up for it with big hips and a very nice butt. And of course, a cute face and gorgeously healthy long black hair down to her mid-back, which she's always been very diligent in taking care of. Can't even count the hours spent with her as a tween on the couch, watching Phineas and Furball with E as she absent-mindedly brushed away. Anyway, we've been close her entire life. I took baths with her until I was 11, she's never stopped cuddling up to me when she feels like it, either on the couch or crawling into my bed. On trips to our grandparents or a hotel, I don't think she's ever slept separately from me. And I'm always the first person she goes to with her problems. When I got my license at 16, I started driving her to school, and through this I got to know most of her friends, who would rarely hang out at our house and instead at a rich girl's. So my parents didn't really, and I ended up frequently getting invited to drive her and her friends around to all sorts of activities, because they liked being able to say whatever sort of cusses and jokes with me driving versus needing to be tight-lipped with a parent. This didn't stop when they got old enough to drive either. They honestly all became my friends as well, though the age gap meant I had to maintain a big brother type of relationship with all of them. Anyway, that's how I became my sister's convention buddy. Starting at 14, she would have me take her to one every year. I'm not nearly as much into a lot of the nerd culture stuff that she is and probably wouldn't go by myself, though I do have an interest in some things like cartoons, so occasionally there would be a guest present that would excite me too, but it made me happy to see her happy, and it was always a fun weekend out of town. In high school there'd usually be another kid or two that would tag along from the anime club. One year was with one club member who was her boyfriend for a bit and ended rather poorly with them having an argument and not speaking on the ride home. Looking back, I think he was frustrated because Katie and I slept in the bed together without even thinking about it, because it's such an ingrained habit for us, rather than her trying to initiate any intimacy with him, which is honestly hilarious. After high school I stayed in town to work at my uncle's company. I bought an old bargain farmhouse in our area at 21 and have steadily done upgrades to raise its value and give it some modernity. The house payment is cheap enough that I don't need to rent anything out, and so I'm in a 4-bedroom house with no one but me and my dogs. My sister went to college an hour away at 18, and so suddenly we saw each other much less, but every summer and holiday that she came back to visit our parents, she stays at my place, enjoying the lack of rules and being able to cuddle up to me. Which is something I honestly realized I deeply missed after living alone for a while too, and every year we still go to a con together, except for this godforsaken one, obviously. When she was in high school and brought friends along, there was no hiding that I'm her brother, and I took more of a distanced chaperone approach, but in the years since in which she's lost touch with them and we've gone alone, she's been much more attached at the hip with me the whole time. It didn't take long to realize from their interactions with us that many people naturally assumed we were a couple, and as she takes the lead in talking to strangers who want a photo or a little chat, which they do because she goes in cosplay, generally dressed as an anime character I'm fully unfamiliar with, I notice she isn't saying anything to dissuade the notion either. I decided to humorously bring this up while we sat down to eat lunch one day. You know, people totally seem to think we're dating. She giggled. Yeah, I actually wanted to bring that up with you before I freak you out. Is it okay if I actually say you're my boyfriend? I'm pretty confused. Heh, why? You know, lots of creeps around. Plus, like, I'm just here to have fun, I don't want that kind of attention. This makes sense. Ah, okay. Yeah, sure. And so we started acting the part fully for each con we went to for the next 3 years. No kissing, nothing untoward, and we'd still get in bed together and sleep with the exact same level of non-sexual comfort we always have. She'd rarely have to introduce me as her BF directly, but if she was in any sort of situation where people gave her a vibe, she would be sure to hold my hand, which was honestly really cute and made me feel proud to protect my little sister. That is, until last year. Over the week before that year's con she seemed extra eager for it and was putting more work into her costume than normal. Spending a good amount on handmade props and a high-quality blue wig, she almost never bothers with characters without black hair due to the difficulty in hiding her long natural locks under wigs and her refusal to dye it due to wanting to keep it healthy. Eventually she says to me that the reason for her excitement is that she's going to meet a group of friends she has on Discord for the first time. As the protective big bro, I have some natural mixed feelings about her meeting up with internet strangers and maybe a bit of jealousy that it's not going to be the personal bonding time for us that it had evolved into previously. But the rational part of my brain figures that she's a smart adult woman who can make her own decisions and to be happy for her happiness. So we arrive at the con, and she directs us to the hall she's supposed to meet the others at, and soon after we wander in, a group starts waving frantically towards us. She practically jumps across the room to them and engages one in a big hug as I gate over at my normal pace. As they come into focus, I realize everyone there, 6 in total, all dressed in some kind of costume, is a guy. A little surprising but not too weird. A lot of her interests are more male-oriented anyway. All of them seem around our age, mid-20s, so that's good at least. She's excitedly introducing herself and getting all of their real names and connecting them with their screen names as I walk up. Oh, everyone, this is Max, my boyfriend. Okay, still shutting them down, I see. The jealous part of me is actually a bit relieved, even though it really doesn't make sense. Everyone says hi and a couple of them shake my hand. One of them, Eric, tells me dude, amazing shirt. As I was wearing one for my favorite band, and makes a point of talking about them with me for a little bit, as Katie continued to fangirl and recite in jokes with the people she evidently knew so well over chat. Later on we're having a late pub lunch over beers, and after having spent hours at the convention, I don't think Katie has directly said a word to me. Eric does a good job not making me feel like a total eighth wheel though, as he engages me in conversation, and it turns out we have a lot in common in terms of music and movies. Most of these guys only listen to video game soundtracks and nightcore, he said with joking frustration, which I laughed at, and we talked about concerts we've been to and such. Plus he lives in the city we're currently in, which is an hour in the opposite direction from my house, compared to where Katie goes to school, and so my place is half as far away as my sister's typical residence, plus he apparently has the hookup on really good weed. We exchange numbers to hang out sometime, and I leave the lunch feeling good. After that though, the rest of the afternoon going into the evening was kind of soul draining. I think my jealousy still lingering made it hard for me to try and join in, but they certainly weren't inviting me to. So for hours on end I was with a bunch of people discussing things I didn't care much about, and really missing that connection I usually get with my sister. It reaches a point where all the guys decide to head into a bathroom to take a leak, and my sister turned to me and said, "Hey, after this next panel I think we're going to go to Zach's room and play Pathfinder. You're probably not interested, right?" She knows I've never played role-playing games, and that it'd probably frustrate everyone else for me to try and participate, plus the way the question was phrased had a distinct air of time to leave us alone to it. So, dejected, I said no, and once the panel wrapped up I said bye, guys, and waved myself out from the group as they made their way from the convention center into the attached hotel. I wandered around for a little bit, digging through some vendor stores, trying to find anything interesting, and came up short. I'm pretty much ready to call it a night, and so I head over to the liquor store next door and grab a couple Mickeys, so I at least have something other than whatever shit is on cable in the hotel room to keep me company. But then, I get a text from Eric. Room 304 if you want to watch. I think this is a little weird, but the fact I apparently left a good enough impression on this guy that he reached out and is inviting me in makes me feel a little better in that moment. Plus, I really do miss my sister and hope I can share a drink with her, at least if we can't share a conversation. So, I head on up. I was not ready. I knock on the door, and there's a delay in the sound of rustling before it quickly opens, revealing Eric's face. "Come in," he said, somewhat hushed and urgently. "Okay, really weird." I can't even begin to describe the feeling that shot through me, as I was at first taken aback by 5 men without pants, all in some way manipulating their cocks in various states of harness, who also looked at me and flashed some shit-eating grins. I felt frozen for minutes, but as I eventually stepped forward and got a better vantage point, I saw my little sister, still in her blue head anime girl getup, but disheveled. Her tie undone, draping around her neck, the buttons on her white shirt halfway down to reveal her little tits peeking out of the top of a displaced baby blue bra, her skirt flipped up to reveal the motion of the bulge created by her hand, shoved down her striped panties. Her face tensing in state of concentration as she was clearly pleasuring herself. And then she opened her eyes and made contact with mine, and she let out a terrified squeak as she came right then and there, visibly trembling. "So, looks like boyfriend wanted in on it after all," said one of the guys. "Maybe you can help her out with that, since we can't," said another. So, context I didn't get until later. Apparently Katie had set this all up under the pretense of me being a cuck boyfriend who wanted my girlfriend to be book-cockeyed. The rule she had set for them is that they are allowed to come on her, but not allowed to touch her directly. As far as they knew, the rules were set by me, but really it was just her own boundaries, and not wanting her fulfillment of this fantasy to get out of hand. I had no words whatsoever in that moment, just heat and lightheadedness and a bit of sick to the stomach, and definitely a rising tent in my pants. Katie apparently also felt similarly, as there was nothing but little squeals and squeaks from her as she continued to stroke her pussy in the midst of a bunch of men jacking off their dicks. Her blush was the brightest I've ever seen in my life, and I wouldn't doubt mine was similar in hue. "Oh, you guys are so cute," Eric said, having removed his pants once more after having put them on to answer the door. At the time, I had no idea where exactly this was headed or real ability to process the situation, so I just kept standing and watching, the paper bag of malt liquor still dangling from my hand. "Oh, I'm gonna come," said one of the men, who was rapidly jacking himself off. He was sitting on a bed, so others made way for him as he got up to approach my kneeling sister. He got within a foot of her face and let out a seemingly compulsory "oh yeah" as he shot out his first shot of cum over the left side of it, my sister's moaning raising in intensity all the while, settling in a thick white rope on top of her forehead, extending into the blue wig. He let out several more shots that dripped down as thick globs on the side of her face, running down her cheek. He shook his cock to get out the final thinner drops, which landed on her shoulder and tits. "Nice, man," said another clearly out of breath man as he stroked himself standing up, before he made his way to the opposite side of Katie and shot his jizz in much the same way. The glob getting an eye effectively glued shut as he released hot cum on my trembling and moaning little sister as she audibly played with her soaking slit. "Fuck, that's hot, think I'll shoot soon," said one before another said "fuck, me too." They both approached and in near simultaneous fashion released their loads. One from the left side, but aiming towards the middle of her face and shooting globs that rested on her nose, along with some that pulled around her lips, and the other coming towards her chest, his thinner cum splattering in drops across her tits and soaking her bra. It was now just Eric and I finally had enough of a handle on my consciousness that I could somewhat process current events. Most notably, that my hard dick was actively hurting in my jeans from being constrained. My sister was an absolute mess, panting away and eliciting fluttery moans as she continued touching herself, her face of concentration permanent as semen plastered her eyelids shut. "I assume you want to finish her off, unless you're into blue balls," Eric said. "And I know I can't touch her, but is the wig okay?" I didn't have any idea what he was talking about, so I just said sure and watched as he approached her while jacking his cock. He went behind her and took blue wig in his hand and wrapped it around his dick, then thrusting himself into the wig. He pulled out and then stood over top of the back of her head as he stroked himself, before squatting down slightly to shoot the thickest cum yet onto her face from above, firing several impressive shots, some of which missed and drenched her skirt. It was really just her and I now. I was no longer conscious of the others in the room. I had set down my bag, at least, but it was pretty impossible to focus on anything, except that in front of me was my sister. My beautiful sweet little sister I'd do anything for, reduced to essentially a cum rag. In the weirdest way I felt that she looked gorgeous like this. Someone who I so associate with cuteness and joy and comfort and nostalgia, getting so messy, making men happy. It feels naughty in an oddly playful way. Like this is all a part of her act, and she's just doing a great job committing to this character, and this is all just for fun, and that if I want to be a team player, I should be participating too. My headspace was truly out of whack in that moment, and most certainly as I began to unbutton and pull down my jeans. But as my hand grazed over my cock, it did finally hit me. This is real. It can't be, but it must be. And I don't know if she wants this. I don't know if I want this. What are the consequences? How will I cope if I hurt her? The anxiety pain in my stomach suddenly became very prominent. And so I went to the bedside table and grabbed a tissue. I approached Katie, the motion in her panties having stopped and breath ragged, though still occasionally whimpering in sexual response, and I wiped cum from my little sister's eyelids. She flinched at first, but I said Katie in reassurance, so she knew it was me. She opened her eyes, seeing me in my underwear. Max. And then she reached out and grabbed my bulge. I couldn't help but groan as she touched my overly sensitive, rock-hard dick over my underwear. She gasped and inhaled sharply and continued to moan and whimpers as she softly pet my cock and then cupped my low-hanging balls in her hand and mildly juggled them around. I felt that this teasing was more than enough to make me come, and so I hooked around my waistband and pulled it down, allowing my cock to spring free. She gripped around it and stroked me, softly and then aggressively, her vocal exertions gaining volume. Then she leaned in her jizz-splattered head, sticky white drying to merge with her pale skin, and took me through the softest lips I've ever felt into the warmest mouth there's ever been. My little sister hummed on my cock as she began to suck me on her knees, taking me in short strokes, and gradually increasing her effort until her nose was in my pubic hair and her chin was grazing my pent-up balls. I knew there was no way I could last long. It was amazing I had gotten this far already. Oh shit, I'm gonna fucking... And then she released me from her mouth and presented her face within the firing line of the tip of my dick, tongue out, eyes closed. I quickly grasped my cock and began to pump. 2, maybe 3 strokes before I involuntarily said I love you and shot a massive jet of hot cum within point-blank range, directly towards the center of my little sister's face. The sounds she made were downright begging and desperate, again stroking her clit inside of panties so wet they were practically transparent, becoming more pointless by the second. I guided my cock with my hand as I continued to shoot spurt after spurt, evenly coating my beautiful canvas. I shoot one rope towards her tongue and it lands in a straight line, visibly dripping out of sight into the back of her throat. I shake my cock and let out the last few drops all over her head, completing my signature on the wonderful work of art we'd created collaboratively. Oh my god, that was fucking hot, says one of the other guys. Oh yeah, those guys. Long story short, Katie was smart enough to go to that room with a set of pajamas, and so she showered and changed, while Eric chatted me up our previously sexual escapades, which got increasingly awkward as I really didn't have answers for anything. As if it would really time to be shy about that sort of thing after watching my GF Take 7 facials, we said our cordial goodbyes, and we headed back to our room where we collapsed on the bed and began to make out furiously. It turns out Katie has been into me sexually for as long as she's had those sort of feelings, but has never sprung it on me because of the fear of damage to our relationship. She admits she never fit in socially at college, which she's now graduated from, for reasons of her interests, race, and our shared humble family background, and so has been relying on online friends for the duration of her education. She ended up getting into some NSFW communities because of fetishes she acquired from, you guessed it, hentai, and eventually became friends with a few people that were able to be persuaded by her nudes and voice that she's a real girl and to meet up. She never intended for me to find out about it and was remorseful for a bit that she put me into proximity of that situation. But she was just so pent up and sexually excited by the idea, while also being afraid of hurting me by cancelling our yearly meetup to hang out with some people she doesn't even know IRL, that she tried to have it both ways. I forgive her. It is definitely not the last time we did sexy stuff.